seems to us that as we contemplate scenes of strife and scenes of suffering, that as some of our community worry and pray for their loved ones who are caught up in the misery and the suffering and the uncertainty of the present moment, that Christ comes to us himself today in this gospel of the Last Judgement. And he challenges us. He challenges us with a gospel that perhaps is always difficult, but perhaps particularly difficult in war. Because some come to him and say to him, "When did we serve you? When did we do things for you? When have we done all of these wonderful acts of mercy and compassion?" And Christ says in the parable, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. Naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." Christ tells us that when we see him in our fellow human being, and when we respond to the need of that fellow human being, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, then we are truly, truly doing this to Christ. Each of us is created in the image and likeness of God, and each of us is an icon of Christ. Most people in the world don't realize this, but it doesn't change the reality. In responding to our fellow human being, whether they are our friend or whether they are our enemy, we respond to Christ in them. This is a great challenge for us, particularly in the present circumstances. But we have to see this, as difficult as it may be. We have to see the reality of the situation for us as Christians is extremely challenging and is extremely complex and isn't straightforward. Because wherever we see suffering, we have to respond. When I think back to school, I can never remember the exact story. Some of our Russians and Ukrainians will be able to fill the detail. There is that description of the streets. Where was it, in Russia or Ukraine? Where people lined up to see the German prisoners of war paraded through. And there were mothers who had lost their sons. And they were there. They were ready to scream. They were ready to howl. They were ready to punch, to kick, and to spit. And when they saw this pathetic straggle of humanity, which had been ground down to its very dregs, what did they see? Perhaps they didn't see Christ, but in the faces and in the bodies of these malnourished and battered German soldiers, they saw their sons. They saw their husbands, their fathers, their brothers. And we know they dashed from the street, and they brought what they had. Probably very little. These women were starving. They grabbed black bread or whatever they could, and they came and they forced it into the hands of these starving, pathetic individuals who had probably done some awful things and who were meant to be the enemy. But in them, they saw human beings. And in this gospel, we are challenged to see more than human beings in one another, even in our worst enemy. Because in this gospel, we are challenged to see the God-man, who is Christ. And this is a great challenge for us. In everything that we see happening now, we have to look for humanity. We have to look for humanity even in those who are aggressors. We have to look and we have to see our mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and sons and daughters in order to avoid the hate which will disfigure us and which will kill our souls. Adversely, we hear in this gospel, when Christ pushes others aside and they ask, whenever did we fail you? He tells us very pointedly, whenever you saw another human being in need and in misery and in deprivation, and you ignored that. And this is the challenge for us now. Not to be like those who are cast out because we failed to feed Christ, to clothe Christ, to house him, to visit him in captivity. The challenge of the church now is to be the voice of Christ. And when we talk of the church, we don't talk on a gigantic institutional level. We talk about the church in which each of you are members. Each of you who stood up and joined in the creed. Each of you who wear the cross around your neck. That cross which challenges you to behave and to live in and act in a way that is other than the world expects. And the challenge of the time in which we find ourselves now is the challenge to be compassionate, the challenge to be merciful, and the challenge to love everyone. It's not for us to imagine that we have to somehow swallow tyranny, but we know that this present situation is a situation in which there are many players with many agendas, many pushing their ambitions, with human beings caught in the middle. Perhaps we cannot change the big players in all of this, but we can at least address the humanity in all of this. We can pray with humanity. We can collect money, whatever we need to do with humanity. We can remember everybody with humanity. Whether it's the souls of the departed who have already lost this life, whether they're soldiers on either side, whether they're people who have been hit by artillery, whether it's the child who died in the cancer hospital. These people have to make us human. For the sake of those who are gone, for the sake of those who are departed, we have to be human. We have to be merciful. We have to pray for change. We have to pray for enlightenment. We have to pray for those who are yet to face sorrow. We have to pray for mothers in Russia who don't even know what's going on and who will soon start receiving body bags like the mothers of Chechnya with their sons coming home. Boys who didn't even know where they were going and what they would be doing. This is the tragedy of this. We have to be human to these people too. And we have to go away with this gospel of the Last Judgment. Because that's what this Sunday is. It is the Sunday of the Last Judgment. And it is by this humanity and this love and this compassion that we are told that we will be judged. Not by long lists of other activities, other achievements. Nothing is said in here of fasting. In fact, nothing is said of prayer. It comes down to this basic commandment to love and to respond with love. And so now we have to respond. And when we respond, it's a double. We respond with Christ in us, and we respond to Christ in the people whom we see in misery. Christ in this is the giver. Christ in this is the receiver. And indeed, for those who become bitter and twisted and hard-hearted, Christ will be the judge. Amen.